A former pilot traveling as a passenger seems unremarkable until catastrophic failure strikes Flight 447. With 185 lives at stake and the captain unconscious, she reveals skills no civilian should possess. When F-22 Raptors arrive and speak her legendary call sign over the radio, everyone realizes who just saved them. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The Boeing 777-300ER climbed through 38,000 feet as Flight 447 from Seattle to Tokyo crossed the North Pacific. Sarah Mitchell sat in seat 24C, appearing unremarkable in jeans and a navy sweater, reading a paperback. At 42, she carried herself with quiet confidence, though nothing suggested her extraordinary background. Flight attendant Jessica paused during beverage service. Coffee or tea? Sarah requested black coffee, and Jessica noticed how her eyes tracked to the wing. Are you in the industry? She asked. Sarah smiled modestly. I used to fly, actually. Retired a few years ago. Jessica brightened. Oh, wonderful. What did you fly? Sarah offered her practiced deflection. Various aircraft over the years. The lifestyle eventually wore me down, so I made a change. Jessica nodded sympathetically. The schedules must be brutal. Did you fly domestic mostly? Sarah gazed out the window. Overseas, actually. Middle East, Asia, some European routes. Good experience, but eventually you want to sleep in your own bed. The man in 24B, David, a software engineer from Portland, leaned over. You used to be a pilot? What made you hang up the wings? Sarah maintained her friendly vagueness. Just felt like the right time for a career transition. I'd accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. What she didn't tell anyone was that her retirement came after 16 years flying F-15E Strike Eagles in combat operations across 3 theaters of war. She didn't mention the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor, the Air Medals, or the classified missions that earned her a call sign spoken with reverence in fighter squadrons worldwide. Her call sign was Reaper, earned through her uncanny ability to appear during critical moments and her tactical precision under fire. After her 3rd deployment, she'd flown 17 consecutive combat sorties in 72 hours with flawless execution despite mechanical issues, severe weather, and intense fire. At 39,000 feet, Sarah detected a barely perceptible change in engine note, a slight asymmetry her trained ears caught instantly. Captain Richardson's voice came over the PA, calm and professional. We're experiencing a minor technical issue with one of our engines. Nothing to be concerned about. But Sarah knew better. Then came the smell, faint but unmistakable, burning insulation. First Officer Chen's voice followed, tense. All passengers return to seats immediately. Flight attendants, prepare for emergency procedures. Everything erupted at once. The aircraft lurched violently left, nose dropping. Oxygen masks deployed. The master caution alarm screamed from the flight deck. Passengers screamed, grabbing masks desperately. Sarah pulled hers down with practiced efficiency, eyes scanning with combat-honed clarity. The aircraft descended rapidly, fighting the controls. Through her window, Sarah saw the left wing's leading-edge devices misaligned, spoilers extending asymmetrically, catastrophic failure. Jessica appeared, struggling for balance, face pale. The cockpit, Captain Richardson collapsed. First Officer Chen is trying to fly alone but the controls, she needs help. Sarah was already unbuckling. Jessica, take me to the cockpit now. I'm a military aviator with extensive emergency experience. Tell First Officer Chen my name is Sarah Mitchell and I flew F-15 Strike Eagles for the Air Force. The door unlocked and Sarah pushed through. Captain Richardson slumped unconscious in the left seat. First Officer Chen fought the controls, face streaming with sweat and tears. I can't hold it. Hydraulics failing, fly-by-wire intermittent, left wing won't come up. We're losing altitude at 3,500 feet per minute. Sarah's hand touched Chen's shoulder, her voice cutting through chaos with absolute calm. First Officer Chen, I'm Captain Sarah Mitchell, former Air Force fighter pilot with 3,000 hours in high-performance aircraft. Stay on controls, you're keeping us alive. I'm taking the left seat. We're getting through this together. She moved Richardson to the jump seat, checking his pulse, weak but present, then dropped into the captain's seat. Her hands found controls, feet found pedals, eyes began the automatic scan drilled through thousands of hours. She felt the aircraft through her hands, felt the damage, the aerodynamic forces fighting them. The instrument panel blazed with warnings. The primary flight display showed conflicting airspeed indications, the attitude indicator precessing wildly. Here's what's happening, Sarah said steadily. The left engine came apart, took out hydraulic lines. Significant wing damage affecting lift and control. Asymmetric thrust initiated a roll the damaged controls can't counter. We're not in uncontrolled dive yet, we have options. She pulled the right throttle back, reducing thrust asymmetry, working trim controls with practiced precision. Altitude? 28,000, descent rate 3,000 feet per minute, Chen responded, voice gaining control. Good. We're not accelerating the descent. Our changes are working. Keep talking to me about those numbers. Sarah experimented with control inputs, testing limits, building a mental model. The aircraft responded sluggishly to ailerons but better to rudder. She worked trim continuously, reducing control force requirements, giving Chen's tired arms relief. Chen, get on the radio. Contact Seattle Center on emergency frequency. Tell them Flight 447, heavy, declaring emergency, multiple system failures, one engine out, significant flight control damage, 185 souls aboard, requesting immediate vectors to nearest suitable airport. Chen transmitted the call, her voice stronger now, professional. While Chen handled communications, Sarah continued working the aircraft. They were hundreds of miles from the nearest airport. Landing with this damage would be extraordinarily dangerous. But she had faced longer odds in combat, had brought damaged aircraft home when others assumed she was lost. Seattle Center responded. Flight 447, roger your emergency. Nearest suitable airport is Cold Bay, Alaska, 500 nautical miles northeast. Recommend heading 340. How do you assess your ability to make it? Sarah took the microphone. Seattle Center, this is the assisting pilot. I have experience with damaged aircraft recovery. We're maintaining flight with significant control difficulty. Estimate we can maintain controllable flight for 2 hours if we don't encounter additional failures, but landing will be extremely challenging. Need the longest runway available with maximum emergency equipment. Also request military assistance for coordination. I'm former Air Force, call sign Reaper, and may need procedures outside normal civilian protocols. Pause on the radio, longer than normal. Sarah knew her call sign was being verified. A new voice came on, military controller's clipped tone. Reaper, this is Falcon Operations, Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. We have your emergency and are launching alert fighters for tactical support. Confirm you are assuming pilot in command? Sarah glanced at Chen, whose face showed shock and desperate hope. Falcon Operations, affirmative. Assuming command under emergency authority due to pilot incapacitation and critical systems failures. Request vector to best divert and full emergency protocol. Roger Reaper, understand all. Fighters launching now, should be on station your location in 45 minutes. Flight data shows you're currently at 26,000 feet, confirm. Sarah checked instruments, cross-referencing with backup and mental calculation. Falcon Operations, we're actually at 24,000 now. Primary instruments unreliable. We've stabilized descent rate to 1,500 feet per minute, but fighting significant control issues. I need those fighters on station with full sensor suite, may need real-time telemetry and visual confirmation of our structural condition. Can't see full extent of left wing damage from the cockpit. Copy that, Reaper. Fighters will be F-22 Raptors with full sensor capability. They'll coordinate directly with you on tactical frequency. Do you need us to coordinate anything with cabin crew? Sarah thought quickly. The cabin had to be in chaos. She needed to project calm and confidence. Falcon Operations, have Seattle Center relay to cabin crew that situation is under control. We have qualified pilots managing the emergency, working toward landing at suitable airport. Tell them to prepare cabin for possible emergency evacuation but emphasize we're working to prevent that scenario. Chen spoke up, voice steadier. Who are you, really? Reaper. F-22s. You're not just a retired pilot who flew commercial routes, are you? Sarah kept her eyes on instruments, hands constantly adjusting controls. First Officer Chen, I'll explain later, but right now I need you to trust me and help me fly this aircraft. I flew fighter jets for 16 years, did 4 combat deployments, dealt with emergencies that would make this look like training. But none of that matters if we don't focus right now. I need you to monitor fuel state, work radios when I tell you, keep your hands ready to take controls if needed. Okay. Chen nodded slowly, eyes showing awe and renewed confidence. Okay. Fuel state shows 32,000 pounds remaining, but with one engine we're burning faster than normal. Current consumption gives approximately 3 hours endurance. Sarah processed that quickly. 3 hours was better than expected, giving them options. Good. Keep monitoring closely. Also check fuel distribution. With left-wing damage, we may have fuel trapped in tanks we can't access. Time became fluid as Sarah and Chen worked together, their cooperation evolving from desperate strangers to efficient team. Sarah found herself falling into patterns perfected in the Air Force, crew resource management that had kept her alive through hostile skies. She talked Chen through each decision, explaining reasoning, building the younger pilot's confidence while maintaining absolute control. They experimented with configurations, speeds, power settings, slowly expanding understanding of what the damaged aircraft could and couldn't do. The cabin remained relatively quiet, initial panic subsiding into tense vigilance. Jessica had made her way back to the cockpit door several times, passing notes and questions. Sarah had Chen relay calm, factual updates. They were under control, working toward a solution. Passengers should remain calm and trust the crew. What Sarah didn't relay was the constant mental calculation she was running of their chances. With every passing minute, she was building a clearer picture of just how damaged the aircraft really was. The F-22 Raptors arrived on station exactly when predicted, their formation appearing first as distant contrails before materializing into sleek, predatory forms. Lead pilot came up on tactical frequency, call sign Night 1. Reaper, night flight of 2, on station your location. Ready to provide tactical support. Request permission to perform visual inspection of your aircraft. Sarah felt a wave of emotion, relief, gratitude, a connection to a world she'd left behind. Night 1, Reaper, cleared for visual inspection. Need detailed assessment of my left wing damage, particularly leading edge, wing root, and engine pylon area. 1 F-22 broke formation and dove below the 777's flight path, then pulled up alongside, closing to within 50 feet. Sarah could see the fighter through her window, its angular, stealthy lines stark contrast to the rounded commercial aircraft. The pilot's voice came back, grim. Reaper, Night 2. Your left wing damage is extensive. Significant structural damage to leading edge, approximately 6 feet of damaged surface, with hydraulic fluid streaming from multiple locations. Engine pylon shows impact damage consistent with blade separation. Visible deformation to wing's upper surface near root. Honestly, I'm impressed you're maintaining controlled flight at all. Sarah keyed the mic, Night 2. How does damage look in terms of structural integrity for landing loads? Am I going to lose the wing if I put this thing on a runway? Pause, then the F-22 pilot responded. Reaper, assessment team says wing structure appears compromised but still intact. They recommend absolute minimum speed on final approach, maximum use of aerodynamic braking after touchdown, expect potential structural failure if you exceed normal landing loads. They're saying you basically get one chance. If you have to go around, the stress from applying power and pulling up again might cause catastrophic wing failure. Sarah absorbed this calmly. Night 1, Reaper, copy all. One chance to get it right. I need you guys to stick with me all the way to airport. I'll need real-time updates on position and approach path since my instruments are partially compromised. Also need you to relay to airport that they should have every piece of emergency equipment staged and ready, because if this goes wrong, it's going to go wrong fast. Night 1's response carried absolute confidence and respect. Reaper, you've got us with you all the way. Whatever you need. Just bring those people home, ma'am. The flight to Cold Bay took nearly an hour and a half, every minute testing endurance and skill. Sarah's arms ached from constant control inputs, legs burned from pressure on rudder pedals, mind exhausted from relentless focus required to keep the aircraft stable. But she never wavered, never let fatigue show. She kept Chen involved in every decision, turning their two-person crew into an effective team. She had Chen coordinate with flight attendants to prepare cabin for emergency landing, passengers briefed on brace positions, emergency exits identified and prepped, loose items secured, anything that might cause injury during rough landing addressed. As they approached Cold Bay, Sarah began the most critical phase, setting up for approach and landing. Cold Bay's runway was 10,600 feet long, plenty for normal landing but tight when dealing with an aircraft that might not respond properly to braking. Sarah studied approach charts, memorizing terrain, approach path, missed approach procedure they desperately hoped to never need. She discussed the plan with Night 1 and Night 2, using their position to confirm runway heading and alignment. Okay Chen, here's how this works, Sarah said, voice carrying calm authority of a combat leader briefing a mission. I'm flying this approach manually from about 10 miles out. No automation, no autopilot, just hands and feet on controls. You're going to call out altitudes, airspeeds, and distances. I need those callouts precise and clear. When I tell you to configure for landing, you're going to put gear down and extend flaps in small increments as I command. We're landing with minimum flaps to reduce stress on damaged wing structure. Our touchdown speed will be about 30 knots faster than normal. I need the airspeed margin in case we get unexpected control response. After touchdown, I need you to pull both throttles to idle on my command, then I'll work the braking. If anything starts to feel wrong during approach, if I start losing control or if it looks like we can't make safe landing, I'm calling a go-around and we'll figure out different solution. Questions? Chen shook her head. No questions. I'm with you. Sarah smiled grimly. Good. And Chen. Regardless of how this turns out, you did outstanding work today. You kept this aircraft flying when most pilots would have lost control. Remember that. Chen's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away and straightened. Let's get everyone home, Captain. The use of the title was a sign of respect and trust that Sarah accepted with a nod. The approach began at 10 miles, Sarah hand-flying with precision from thousands of hours of practice and real-world application. She could feel every nuance of the aircraft's behavior, compensating for the damaged wings, reduced lift with extra speed, countering asymmetric drag with rudder pressure, maintaining perfect descent path. Night 1 and Night 2 flanked them in loose formation, providing position updates and encouragement. Reaper, Night 1, looking good. Centered on approach path, 3 degrees glide slope, 5 miles from threshold. Gear down, Sarah commanded. Chen moved the gear lever. The rumble and drag of landing gear extending shook the aircraft, adding to control challenges. Sarah compensated smoothly, adjusting power, trimming to maintain descent rate. Flaps 10. Chen extended the first increment. More drag, more control changes. Sarah's hands moved constantly, never resting. 3 miles, on speed, on glide slope, Chen called out, voice steady. Flaps 20. Another increment, another wave of drag. The left wing shuddered slightly as damaged structure responded to increased loads. 2 miles, 200 knots. They were coming in hot, faster than normal approach speed, but Sarah needed that margin. 1 mile, 180 knots, on centerline. Night One's voice came through. Reaper, beautiful approach. Half mile to threshold, you're in the slot. Sarah's world narrowed to the runway ahead, the instrument readings Chen was calling out, the feel of the controls. 50 feet above runway, 30 feet, 20 feet. Throttle idle, she commanded. Chen pulled the throttle to idle position. The aircraft floated for a moment, Sarah holding the nose up with gentle back pressure, bleeding off speed, feeling for the perfect moment when the main gear would kiss the runway. The left main gear touched first, a gentle settling onto concrete that Sarah felt through the airframe. She let the right main settle a fraction later, maintaining directional control with rudder, keeping nose gear up to use aerodynamic braking. 5 seconds later, she let nose gear settle, and immediately reached for the spoiler handle to dump lift and increase drag. The aircraft rumbled down the runway, slowing gradually, Sarah using careful differential braking and steering to maintain centerline, nursing the damaged aircraft through every foot of rollout. They were at 60 knots when Sarah allowed herself to think they might actually make it. 40 knots, and the end of the runway was approaching, but they had enough space. 20 knots, and the aircraft was fully under control, the emergency over, 185 lives saved through skill and determination and refusal to give up when everything seemed impossible. They came to complete stop with 3,000 feet of runway remaining. Sarah sat back in the seat, her hands shaking now with adrenaline crash, her entire body trembling with exhaustion and relief and overwhelming emotion. Night One's voice came over tactical frequency, and Sarah heard the emotion in it. Reaper, Night One. Magnificent flying. One of the finest displays of airmanship I've ever witnessed. Welcome to Cold Bay. Night Two's voice followed. Reaper, all respect, ma'am. That was legendary. You just saved 185 souls with flying that belongs in textbooks. Sarah keyed the mic, voice rough with emotion. Night Flight, thanks for the support. Couldn't have done it without your help. The F-22s pulled up and away, their afterburners igniting as they climbed back toward home base. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft, fire trucks, ambulances, rescue equipment, all standing ready for the disaster that hadn't happened because one person had refused to let it happen. Chen was staring at her with awe, gratitude, and complete emotional overwhelm. You saved us. You saved all of us. How did you? Who are you? Sarah managed a tired smile. I'm just a pilot, Chen. Just a pilot who's been around long enough to have learned a few things. The cabin door opened and Jessica appeared, face streaked with tears, rushing to Sarah with arms outstretched. You saved our lives. Everyone is asking who you are, what happened, how you managed to do that. Sarah stood slowly, every muscle protesting, and accepted Jessica's embrace. Tell them I'm just someone who used to fly and happened to be in the right place at the right time. But the truth was already spreading. The air traffic control recordings would be analyzed, the cockpit voice recorder transcribed, and Sarah's identity would become public knowledge. By the time passengers were evacuated from the aircraft and taken to the terminal, news crews were arriving, the story spreading across aviation networks and social media. Former Air Force fighter pilot saves entire flight using elite combat training. Call sign Reaper returns to legendary status after civilian heroics. It was 3 hours later, after passengers had been safely transported, after preliminary investigations had begun, after Sarah had given her initial statement to accident investigators, when the small ceremony occurred that would define her legacy. A transport aircraft landed at Cold Bay carrying senior Air Force officers who had flown in specifically to personally acknowledge what Sarah had accomplished. Among them was Brigadier General Marcus Webb, who had been Sarah's wing commander during her second combat deployment. They gathered on the tarmac near the damaged airliner. General Webb stepped forward, his dress uniform crisp. "Captain Mitchell," he began, voice formal but warm with genuine emotion, "what you accomplished today represents the highest traditions of military aviation excellence applied to save civilian lives. You took command of an emergency situation that would have defeated most pilots, and through superior airmanship, tactical decision-making, and sheer determination, you brought 185 people home safely. The Air Force is proud to have trained you, proud of your service, and proud of what you accomplished today as a civilian." Night 1 and Night 2 had returned to Cold Bay, their F-22s parked at the far end of the ramp. The two pilots walked over in their flight suits, helmets under arms, approaching with measured respect that fighter pilots reserved for those they considered peers and legends. Night 1, Major Tyler Harrison, came to attention. "Ma'am, on behalf of the fighter community and everyone privileged to support you today, I want to say it was an honor to fly with you. Your call sign is legendary in the fighter world, and now the whole world is going to know why." Night 2, Captain Jennifer Liu, spoke next. "Captain Mitchell, when we heard your call sign over the radio, when we realized who was up there fighting to save that aircraft, everyone on the frequency knew those passengers had the best possible chance. You didn't just handle it, you made it look like something from a training manual. That's what legends do." General Webb reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small box. "Captain Mitchell, you retired from active service 3 years ago after 16 years of distinguished service. You left behind a legacy that includes the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor, 2 Air Medals, and a combat record that speaks for itself. But I think it's important that everyone here understands what your call sign represents, why it's spoken with such respect in fighter squadrons around the world." He opened the box, revealing a custom-made patch showing the Grim Reaper design that had been Sarah's personal aircraft marking during her combat deployments, along with a certificate bearing her call sign and a summary of her service achievements. "Your call sign, Reaper, was earned through 17 consecutive combat sorties in 72 hours during the most intense air campaign of your third deployment. You flew missions that other pilots considered suicide runs, and you brought yourself and your wingmen home every single time. You have 3 confirmed air-to-air victories, numerous successful ground attack missions, and you personally coordinated a search and rescue operation that brought home 3 downed pilots that everyone else had written off as lost. You were the pilot other pilots wanted flying their wing when things got dangerous because they knew you would find a way through, no matter how impossible the situation appeared." Sarah stood at attention, military bearing returning instinctively as she accepted this public acknowledgement. General Webb continued, his voice carrying across the tarmac where passengers and ground crew had gathered. "Today, you proved that those skills, that training, that determination don't fade when you take off the uniform. You proved that the best of military aviation excellence can save lives in the civilian world just as surely as it protects our nation in combat. Captain Mitchell, on behalf of the United States Air Force and the grateful citizens whose lives you saved today, I present you with this recognition of your continued service to others and your status as a living legend in the aviation community." Night 1 and Night 2 came to attention and rendered sharp salutes. General Webb saluted as well, and Sarah returned it with precision from years of practice. Then something extraordinary happened. Over the tactical frequency that was still monitoring the area, which someone had connected to the ground crew's radio speakers, came the voices of fighter pilots from bases across the Pacific region, pilots who had heard about the emergency, who had monitored the approach and landing, who knew the call sign and the legend behind it. One by one, call signs spoke over the frequency in a tradition reserved for the highest honors and the deepest respect. "Reaper, Falcon 1-1. Respect and admiration, ma'am. Reaper, Eagle 07. You showed us all how it's done. Reaper, Viper 3-3. Legend confirmed and enhanced. Reaper, Cobra 2-2. The fighter community salutes you." The voices continued, call signs from squadrons Sarah had served with, call signs from pilots she had mentored, call signs from aviators who had only heard the stories but who understood the magnitude of what she had accomplished. First Officer Chen stood nearby, tears streaming down her face as she finally understood exactly who had been sitting next to her in the cockpit, who had saved her life and the lives of everyone aboard. Jessica and the other flight attendants were openly crying, hugging each other, their fear and trauma transformed into overwhelming gratitude and pride. The passengers who had gathered were applauding, many with tears of their own, finally understanding that the modest woman who had described herself as a former pilot was actually one of the finest aviators in modern military history. David, the software engineer who had been in seat 24B, stood at the front of the crowd, his face showing amazement. "She told me she used to fly," he said to no one in particular. "She said she'd accomplished what she wanted to accomplish. She never mentioned that she was a warrior, a hero, a legend." Sarah stood quietly through it all, accepting the recognition with grace but also with humility. When the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, she found herself surrounded by passengers wanting to thank her personally. An elderly woman approached, supported by her granddaughter, tears streaming down her face. "I was flying to Tokyo to meet my great-granddaughter for the first time," she said, voice breaking. "Because of you, I'll get to hold her, to see her smile. How can I possibly thank you for that gift?" Sarah took the woman's hands gently. "You just did, ma'am. You get to meet your great-granddaughter. That's all the thanks I need." A young father with 2 small children came next, his kids hiding behind his legs. "My wife, their mother, is waiting for us in Tokyo," he said, voice thick with emotion. "She was supposed to become a widow today, and they were supposed to grow up without a father. But we're going to get home to her because you refused to let us die. I'll never forget what you did. Never." First Officer Chen approached last, after the passengers had been guided toward the terminal. "Captain Mitchell, Sarah, I need to know something. When you got up from your seat and came to the cockpit, when you took control and started working the problem, were you confident we could make it? Did you really think we would survive?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Honestly, I thought we had about a 30% chance when I first saw the damage. But I've lived through situations with worse odds, and I learned a long time ago that you don't quit when the numbers look bad. You work the problem, you stay focused, you use everything you've learned and every skill you've developed, and you give yourself and everyone depending on you the absolute best chance possible. Sometimes 30% is enough if you execute perfectly and refuse to accept failure. Today was one of those times." Chen nodded slowly, processing this wisdom. "Thank you for teaching me that lesson. Thank you for showing me what real airmanship looks like. I'll carry what I learned today for the rest of my career." As the sun set over Cold Bay, painting the Alaskan sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Sarah finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. She stood alone on the tarmac for a few moments, looking at the damaged 777 that represented both a nightmare averted and a reminder of who she really was beneath the civilian facade she had constructed. Her attempt to fade into anonymous normalcy had been shattered by circumstances beyond her control, and now the world knew about Reaper, knew about the fighter pilot legend, knew about the skills and achievements that had made her call sign something spoken with reverence. General Webb approached quietly. "You okay, Sarah?" Sarah turned to face him, a complicated smile on her face. "I spent 3 years trying to be normal, Marcus. Trying to be just another person, just another former pilot with a quiet consulting career and a peaceful life. I thought I had left Reaper behind, thought I could just be Sarah Mitchell and no one would ever need to know about the combat missions and the decorated service and all of that." General Webb nodded understandingly. "But Reaper was never just a call sign. It was who you are at your core, the person who appears when others need you most, who brings skill and determination and absolute excellence to impossible situations. You can't leave that behind any more than you can leave behind your own heart." Sarah looked back at the aircraft. 185 people are alive right now because of skills I learned in combat, because of training the Air Force gave me, because I spent years pushing myself to be better than I thought possible. I tried to pretend that part of my life was just a chapter that ended when I retired. But maybe you're right. Maybe it's not about leaving Reaper behind. Maybe it's about understanding that those skills, that determination, that excellence, they're meant to be used when they're needed, whether that's in combat or in situations like this. General Webb smiled. The fighter pilot community has always known that Reaper was legendary. After today, the entire world knows it too. And 185 people and their families will forever be grateful that when they needed a legend most, one was sitting in seat 24C on their flight. The investigation that followed would take months, examining every aspect of the catastrophic engine failure and cascading systems problems. The findings would lead to improved maintenance procedures, enhanced system redundancies, and better training. But the central conclusion was clear from the beginning: Flight 447 should have crashed. The combination of engine failure, hydraulic damage, flight control problems, and pilot incapacitation created a scenario that exceeded the design parameters and survival capabilities of both the aircraft and standard pilot training. The only reason 185 people survived was the presence of an extraordinary pilot whose unique combination of skills, experience, and sheer determination made the impossible possible. Sarah Mitchell would receive numerous awards and honors in the months that followed: Aviation Safety Awards, Civilian Heroism Recognition, and special commendations from aviation organizations around the world. But the honor that meant the most to her came from the fighter pilot community itself. At the next gathering of F-15 and F-22 pilots from around the country, a ceremony was held where her call sign was officially enshrined in the Fighter Pilot Hall of Excellence, an honor reserved for the most legendary aviators in military history. The citation read simply: Captain Sarah Mitchell, call sign Reaper, combat excellence, tactical mastery, civilian heroism. 185 lives saved through superior airmanship. And whenever F-22 pilots gathered, whenever fighter aviators told stories of legendary pilots and impossible missions, the name Reaper would be spoken with respect and admiration. The former pilot who had tried to fade into quiet anonymity had instead become a symbol of what the best training, the highest skills, and the refusal to quit could accomplish. Her call sign, once earned in combat, had been reaffirmed in a civilian emergency that proved legends don't retire, they simply wait for the moment when they're needed most. 6 months after the incident, Sarah received an invitation to speak at the Air Force Academy's graduation ceremony. Standing before 1,000 young cadets who would soon earn their wings, she shared the lessons that had saved 185 lives that day over the Pacific. Excellence isn't something you achieve once and then set aside, she told them, her voice carrying across the auditorium. It's a standard you carry with you every day, in every situation, whether you're flying combat missions or sitting in seat 24C on a commercial flight. The skills we develop, the discipline we embrace, the commitment to never quit, these things don't belong only to the military. They belong to life itself. The cadets gave her a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, a young female cadet approached her, eyes bright with determination. "Ma'am, I want to be a fighter pilot like you. I want to earn a call sign that means something." Sarah smiled, remembering herself at that age, full of fire and ambition. Then be ready to work harder than you've ever worked in your life. Be ready to fail and get back up. Be ready to prove yourself every single day. And remember, your call sign isn't something you choose. It's something you earn through who you are and what you do when it matters most. First Officer Chen, who had been invited to the ceremony, stood at the back of the auditorium watching. She had been promoted to captain now, flying her own aircraft, carrying with her the lessons learned during those terrifying hours over the Pacific. She had visited Sarah several times since that day, building a friendship forged in crisis and mutual respect. As they walked together across the academy grounds after the ceremony, Chen asked the question she'd been holding on to for months. "Do you ever regret leaving the Air Force? Giving up flying fighters?" Sarah looked up at the sky, watching a formation of T-38 trainers streak overhead, their white contrails painting lines across the blue. "I used to think I gave something up when I retired. But that day on Flight 447 taught me something important. I didn't leave anything behind. Everything I learned, everything I became, it's all still part of me. Reaper isn't just a call sign from my past. It's who I am, who I'll always be. And sometimes, when the world needs it, Reaper shows up. She turned to Chen with a smile. Just like you showed up that day. You didn't quit when everything was falling apart. You kept fighting. That's the real lesson, not about flying skills or technical knowledge, but about refusing to surrender when lives depend on you. As they walked toward the parking lot, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Night 1, Major Harrison, the F-22 pilot who had escorted her to Cold Bay. The message was simple: Reaper, just wanted you to know, we brief your Cold Bay landing in our squadron now as the gold standard for emergency airmanship. You're officially in our training curriculum. Fair winds, ma'am. Sarah smiled, pocketed her phone, and realized that her legacy wasn't just about the past. It was about inspiring the future, about showing the next generation what was possible when skill met courage met an absolute refusal to let others down. And that, she thought, was worth more than any medal or commendation, knowing that somewhere, young pilots were learning from her example, carrying forward the standard of excellence that defined the call sign Reaper.